Hello there, welcome to part 9 of my 10 minutes at the piano playlist. An interesting subject today, focusing on what I call the internal metronome. You're already familiar with the internal piano, that way of being able to practice on the piano when away from a physical piano, but this time it's about rhythm. Many people say, I don't have a sense of rhythm, and it's not true. It's only the ego saying that. The ego being that negative part of the body, of the brain, and the inspirational source being the positive side. In my book on this philosophy called Water Pianism, you can learn more about that. I also have an article on it, and it's at the beginning of this playlist. So I want to give you one or two different things to think about, which will enable you to release your inherent internal metronome, which means that when you're playing, you will play in time. This doesn't necessarily discuss rhythm and playing different kinds of rhythm, but we can talk about time signatures and tempo at least, and you can use the major scales and the circular fourths and arpeggios to implement the philosophy when you're at the piano and when you're away from the piano, of course. So the first thing I actually want to discuss is not actually about time signatures or anything at all. It's actually about the difference between hearing and listening. The most important way for you to ever release and discover or become conscious of your internal metronome is by listening. But there's a difference between listening and hearing. People use the word listening incorrectly. They say, I listen to music. Well, they don't. What they actually mean is, I hear music. You see, when you listen to music, it's a more consciously involved process. You are focusing on one particular instrument. You are focusing on the actual rhythm. You are studying the structure. You're listening to the guitarist play the chords. You're listening to what melody notes the violins are playing, depending on what you're playing. When somebody's improvising in jazz, you're kind of appreciating the interplay between the notes being played, for example, on the piano, and the notes being played by a guitar. There's something in jazz called sharing eights, for example, and it normally happens near the end of the song when the melody and the improvisation has been played. There'll be 8 bars of, for example, a pianist doing something, then there'll be 8 bars of a guitarist doing something, and then it'll go back to the pianist. So that's listening when you actually study the interplay, for example, as well as just studying notes and melodies and structures in general, but actually there's a conscious involvement with listening. Whereas when you're just travelling on public transport with your headphones in, or the radio is on in the car, you're just hearing music, you're not listening to it. So do understand that difference, it's very important. So the first thing, as I say, about activating and discovering and setting free your inherent internal metronome is by listening. And that doesn't mean listening to only your favourite kind of music. You need to push your boundaries a bit, push the boat out, go and listen to music that you would never imagine listening to, and some Indian music, some Japanese music, some Egyptian music, just different styles, gypsy music, gypsy violins. All these kinds of different music styles have a different feeling, and there's many interesting things to listen to in those, all the while you are able to attach yourself to the rhythm of that music. It's very interesting practice, and of course there's an endless resource of music on YouTube, so you haven't really got any excuses. So that's the first thing, listen to the music and allow the rhythms and the beats to just soak into your brain. It's very, very important. It's just like when you're immersed in a language. That's how you learn your native language. You're immersed in it, you hear it all the time, and eventually, without much conscious involvement, you can just use the language one day when you're 3 or 4 years old. Same kind of thing with this. So there's a difference between hearing and listening. You're naturally hearing things anyway, but listening just requires a bit more conscious involvement. You want to pick up on the rhythm, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just feel it. If I ask you to think of a song that you know really well right now, let's just think of a song that everybody knows, like Imagine by John Lennon. Everybody knows that song. Now that song is now playing in your mind, is it not? You can kind of hear that piano introduction. I need to find it, something like something like that, no? I think there's a 9 in there somewhere. So that's the idea. Now I'm playing that automatically at the right speed, and I'm playing it in time. Each beat I'm playing is in time. But that's not coming from me doing it consciously, that's coming from what you might call the subconscious, or I don't know, it doesn't matter what it's called, it's not coming from me consciously. And that's the stage where you need to arrive at when you're doing these. Now what's interesting about that is you can listen to that song in your mind. You don't even need to listen to the real recording. You can just listen to that song, and when you're walking around you can feel that rhythm, bom, 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 bom. You can just hear it, and it's steady. And that leads me on, when I said walking around, to the other interesting part about discovering your internal metronome, and that is actually walking. You haven't got an excuse to say that you don't walk. Even if you're walking around your house, your apartment, outside, if your job involves walking, if you're a postman perhaps, it's a perfect example when you're just walking, because generally when it's not busy, of course, you're just walking in a steady pace, at a steady pace, and you can use that as a way to exercise mentally your internal metronome. You can think of a song you know, or you can even use that opportunity to combine two things and use your enforce your major scales, which you should know by now, but it will at least enforce them into your brain by using your walking steps as a rhythm. And then you can start to play with the walking steps. So in the beginning you may walk with each step being one beat, kind of like this. I suppose it's like two beats a second, maybe a bit slower than that, but something like that. Just say 2 beats per second, and you could use each beat as a steady rhythm, which is just with you all the time because you're walking, and you can just use that to go up the major scale notes, one beat each time. So you could just be walking left, right, but you're seeing the notes of that scale, then go up the next one, and you can see it in your mind on your internal piano. So you're mixing your internal metronome and allowing it to come out by walking. So it's a really natural thing to do, which is really it's perfect because the internal metronome is natural, and so is walking. So it's always with you. You don't need to only. It means that you don't only need a piano to improve your sense of rhythm, your internal metronome. You can do it naturally when you're walking around. It's very interesting. So not only can you do that with major scales, you can also come to the piano physically if you want to, and combine 3 things. You can combine, or even 4 things. You can combine your metronome, your internal metronome, along with chord shapes, your major triad, your minor triad, your major 7 shapes, your dominant 7 shapes, your minor major 7, your minor 7. I've discussed all of these in a previous video in this playlist, and you can go through those. So you can do your internal metronome, you can do the chord types, you can go through all 12 keys, and you can reinforce your circle of fourths, because when you play things chromatically, it's just a bit boring. And nothing in music really progresses in terms of chromatic chords. It's very rare to go from C to C sharp. Normally it's moving around in fourths or fifths or thirds. So why not use the circle of fourths, the most common, to do that? So you could do some arpeggios when you're walking in your mind, or actually at the piano. But because you will have been practicing this away from the piano, when you come to the piano, it will become stronger and stronger. Your sense of rhythm will just become more and more strengthened. So let's just say that we want to do some simple left and right hand arpeggios. It doesn't need to be complicated. Your goal is not to become a chord master or fingering expert. It's not about that. It's about enabling your internal metronome to just exist without your ego saying it doesn't exist. That's all you need, and then you can go on to greater things. Speed comes passively. You can't practice speed. There's a quote for you. So you might just find your natural speed where you can do this. Closing your eyes is quite useful. So you might do this, for example. But let's say that you want to double the time of each step. So let's just imagine that you're walking, but this time each step that you take is going to be 2 notes. So it's going to be 1, 2, and then when you take the next step it will be 3, 4. Well, let me say that the other way. First step will be, yeah, that's correct, 1 and 2, and then the next step 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you would go 1 like that, but of course you're walking smoothly, so it'll be so left foot, right foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, right foot. And the point is that if you're practicing that and seeing it in your mind when you're walking, when you actually come to the piano and do it physically without walking, it will have been the same place in your mind where the internal metronome exists when you're walking, exists in the same place when you're at the piano. So you can apply on the piano what you've done away from the piano. So you will be able to do this, for example, how do I want to do it? I'll just go up. So one left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, and then go to minors. Left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, and then go up a fourth to F. But then you could do it in threes. You could go 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Let's go down this time because it's a bit more comfortable with the rhythm. So you might just go left, 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 right, 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 left, 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 right, right, right. You can slow down and go left, 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 right, right, right. It's just a way to enable your natural body to present to you your internal piano. In this way, you're not getting your mind involved, which is what I call conscious interference. And of course, I have an article on that. All the links are below. Pretty good video, just a bit over 10 minutes, but never mind. See you in part 10. Thank you very much for watching. Likes, comments, subscriptions, always welcome. All the best, and bye for now.